For my understanding, the Pure Land only has happiness, and if we never suffer, how can we feel the happiness? So there are in the Mahayana school of Buddhism, there are two schools, primary, generally, there's two schools of Buddhism. One we call the Mahayana, and we also call the other Hinayana. Hinayana is also called as a Theravada. Mahayana is the larger wheel. We call it the larger wheel Buddhism, and Hinayana is a smaller wheel. Larger and smaller does not mean is less. It does not measure it by importance. Both are important. It does not mean that the smaller is not as important as the larger. No, it's just another method of practicing. Both are the same and important. In the Mahayana Buddhism, there are 8 schools in itself. And of course, that is the Avantamsaka school. There's also meditation, the 8 schools. One of the schools is Pure Land Buddhism. One of the 8 schools is Pure Land, reciting or chanting the name of Amitabha and involving in samatha and vipassana of reciting the name Amitabha and to be reborn in the Pure Land at the juncture of death. So the Pure Land, so there are people who practice that school, and when they passed away at the juncture of death, they would not reincarnate again, they would be reborn in the Pure Land, and in that land there's only happiness, no suffering at all, only happiness. That is like an intermediate stage where you learn in there to become the Buddha. You're not the Buddha yet. So you will be born in there under the patronage of all these other saints and sages, under the teaching of Amitabha Buddha, Avalokitesvara, Bodhisattva, and a lot of others, philosophers and saints and arahats, until you practice and become the Buddha. So that's the Pure Land. But in there, you enjoy longevity of life of millions of years, and there's no suffering. Now, given that background, to answer this question, it says, if we never suffer, how can we feel the happiness? Well, you are making an assumption that is not true. Are you suffering? If we never suffer, you are suffering and we are suffering. What are these sufferings? We all know all these sufferings. It's not a negative approach to life. Suffering is an accepted fact. International wars, catastrophes, tsunami, earthquake, starvation, genocide, you name it. Criminal offenses, killing, raping, stealing, robbing. So many of these things in the world. You open up the newspapers and you can gather a lot of information on the sufferings of humanities. And not only humans suffer, animals. Humans kill animals for food, you know. In this luncheon, you have done one very good deed. In this luncheon, you're not responsible for all the killings of animals on earth. In all the others, you may be partially responsible. So that's the reason why all Buddhists are vegetarian. They don't kill animals for food. They don't slaughter pigs and cows and chickens, and they eat vegetarian food. They don't kill animals. They render compassion to animals. So, this world is not only characterized by sufferings of humanities, suffering of the humans, it's also characterized by suffering of all animals. Who imposed sufferings on these animals? Usually humans. It's not right, you know. We habitually kill animals for their flesh. And it's not right. It's not right to pass this cruelty to animals. We don't take it for granted that they should be eaten every day. And you go and visit slaughterhouses. If you go to visit slaughterhouses, you will know the cruelty involved in slaughtering chickens and many, many other animals. Getting back to this now, if we never suffer, I don't think we should make an assumption that we never suffer. We suffer. Aging is suffering. Sickness is suffering. Have you been sick before? Is sickness a suffering? Depends on what kind of sickness. I've seen people who is bedridden for years. And Lee just visited someone who has been in a hospital bed for 12 years. And you're eating a good lunch in here. You know what his lunch is? It's a bottle of liquid. They hang it up on that scaffold and they drip it, and that's lunch. For 12 years, that's lunch. And I don't have to tell you all the sufferings in hospitals. You go and visit hospitals. You go and visit orphanages. You're going to visit OH homes. You go and visit hospitals for crippled children, for the mentally retarded. Have we mentioned enough sufferings? We haven't mentioned all the sufferings in other parts of the world. You're in a more developed world. How about in underdeveloped countries? So you can never, I don't think we should, and we can, make the assumption that there's no suffering. So if we never suffer, how can we feel the happiness? Because we know we suffer, and we want to get away from suffering. I guess everybody wants to get away from suffering. And that Pure Land is the intermediate, we call it the country or the land, that we can be born to. And in there, we learned to attain Bodhi, to transcend reincarnation, and get enlightenment to become the Buddha. So, if we never suffer, no, we suffer. How can we feel the happiness? What is happiness? What's the definition of happiness? We already have more or less defined it back there. We've got to have peace of mind to be happy. If you don't have this peace of mind, it does not matter how much money you have, how much reputation, how much material you have, how much possessions you have. If your mind is not at peace, how can you be happy? In there, in the Pure Land, there's no suffering. You always have that joy to learn, to attain anuttara samya sambuddhi, to attain enlightenment. That is an expedient way of becoming the Buddha. Remember the 4 levels that we've talking about? Srota-apana, Sakradagamin, Anagamin, and Arahats. That takes a long time. Just the first level, Srota-apana. After you have attained that level, you still have to be reborn again in 7 times approximately before you become the Buddha. And in the second level, the Sakradagamin, you have to come back to this world of desires for 1 more lifetime before you become the Arahat. And Anagamin, you have to reside in Rupadhatu for 1 more life before you become the Arahat. So to answer that questions, we have suffering, and when we are there, we only have happiness. Maybe what you want to, if I can guess, what you want to know is, if there is no suffering, how do we know happiness? In other words, if we never suffer at all, how do we know there's happiness? But it's not true that you never have suffered. Happiness and suffering is in the world of duality. It's in the world where there's a subject, there's an object. And if you transcend duality, you are away from suffering. And in that, I don't know how we call it, in that Bodhi. Sometimes it's not name. Name is not that important. You can call it whatever you want. You can call Buddhism anything you want. It's just a name. It's just a concept. Don't stigmatize words. Don't stigmatize name. Labelize word. It's not important. Words are not important. It's the meaning of it. So I have answered the first question, and I don't intend to carry on and linger on.